Hello everyone, this is my video to talk about the application that I designed on NodeJS. It's the framework that I selected. I'll try to make it as short as possible, but there is a lot that I can talk about. But I'm just gonna jump directly to Visual Studio and the application itself. Here is my application solution. It's organized onto these folders where I have my controllers, my models, my views, trying to emulate the MVC pattern. Now I'm gonna focus first on the server JS, which is where the actual application starts up. So right there you can see that I configure my web server by using the HTTP module from Node.js. I also use the Express component that expands Node.js for more web related functionality. So I create my application from Express and I then configure my SQL component so I can connect to my SQL database on Azure. So this is my configuration to connect to Azure, and then finally I select the view engine that I will be using so I can render my views with the data on the screen. In this case I'm going to use the batch view engine. I set up my public folder, so anything that I put inside here is not going to be rendered. It will just be sent out to the client the way it is. And basically what I have there are the JavaScripts, the images, the CSS files, anything that the framework doesn't have to deal with. It's not written for Node.js to interpret it. It's just going to be sent to the user the way it is. Then finally I set up my index hub, which is basically the main file that has all the different controllers for the application. I'm gonna load it, and I'm going to initialize my application so it loads up, and I'm going to create my HTTP web server and listen to port 3000. So since my starting point is gonna be my hub, my index within the controllers folder, I'm gonna go ahead and jump into it. I'm gonna go to the controllers folder, to my index file, and all I'm doing there is I'm calling for all the different files that I want to load. This is my hub. So from there I'm going to load my API controller, the user's controller so far. I only have one controller so far, but I'm using the REST architecture, so I'm basing my routes and my controllers on resources. So right now I only have users, but later on I will have products and some other things. So this is my API controller. And then I have my application controller. So my application controller, as a matter of fact, uses the API controller for any data requirements such as getting, read, update, delete, create, and so on, all the CRUD functionality. So I go ahead and register those two controllers and initialize my application with those two controllers. So I will first load the users controller. That's the one that I want to demonstrate first, which is within the API folder. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that up, and all I have inside there is the different routes for the CRUD operations in an API, in a web API, and of course I do some JSON parsing and things like that, because all I'm returning from the API is JSON data. So for example, I have a get all or a read all that if I go through this route is going to select everything from the users table and return it as a JSON type. It's going to send it back as a JSON type. If you go to this route, to the read by ID, so it's going to be API users /ID, then it's going to select only all the data, but only for that specific ID. And it's going to send it back again as a JSON data. If I want to create a new user, then I will go to this route, but from the body, I'm going to get the information. I'm going to pass my user information from the body. So I'm going to get my first, last, email, password, and anything else. And I'm going to insert that new user into the database. And sometimes I want to return the new identity for that record if I want to. I also have an update route. So you can see the /API users and the ID. If I use the put instead of the post HTTP verb, then I will do an update. But again, I get the user information from the body. I can get the ID from the route, from the params on the route, everything else from the body, and then I do an update on the user ID where, on the user information where the ID equals the ID that I got from the route. Finally, I have the delete route, and again, I follow the API users /ID using the delete verb, HTTP verb. So all I do is I get the ID from the route, and I run a delete from users where the ID is equal to ID. So this is a fully functional API for anything, not only for this application, but any other application. Of course, I don't have security right now implemented. It's outside the scope of this exercise, but let me go ahead and run it. I'm gonna go ahead and run this. So the web server is running. It's already listening to port 3000. This port is for debugging purpose, not the actual port that I configure on the server. As you can see right here, it's gonna be listening to port 3000. So it is running. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the browser. I'm gonna navigate to localhost 3000 /API/users, and I'm gonna hit that route that we talked about, the users route. That is gonna be a get. It's gonna do a get and return all the different users that are right now into the database. So you can see that I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 users, where the last one is Paola. And if I go to the Azure database, you can see that I have an Azure database called evacuation, that I created a connection right here to my database, and I have a users table that if I look at the data, we'll see that I have a Paola as the last record, and I probably have 6 records, or as many as I counted before. There you go, that is Paola, and so on. So it is getting the data from the Azure database on the cloud. Okay, so that's as far as the API goes. Now, of course, I have the full CRUD operations configured. So if I use any other utility such as Fiddler, I will be able to do all the different actions, not only get, and again, let me try again that get. I'm just gonna copy the route from here so I don't have to type it in again. If I do a get verb to this path and I execute that, I'm gonna get a 200, and I'm gonna get all the different information for all the users. But if I compose, instead of a get all users, let's say that I just want to get all the information for a specific user, so I'm gonna ask for user ID 9, which is supposed to be Elaine Santos. So I'm gonna go and compose on the route a request using get verb to user ID 9. I'm gonna execute it. I got a response, and you can see that right there I only get ID 9 with the information for Elaine Santos and everything else. Of course, I can always do besides that a post. So if I copied this information from Elaine or a put, I can go to the raw view and copy the information from this user. I can actually use Notepad and create an example data for a specific user. Elaine, for example, let's say that I want to insert a new Elaine. I'm gonna call it Elaine 2, the first name, and the last name is gonna be Santos 2. Everything else is gonna stay the same. Of course, it's an insert, so I don't have an ID. I'm gonna remove that ID from there, and we're just gonna use this data as the new sample data to insert. So when I go to the composition, if I change from get to post and I insert that data as my request body right there, and the route is gonna be, of course, the appropriate route using the REST architecture, and I execute that, I should get a 200 that I inserted a new record. And again, if I go back and I do a get to nothing on the body, of course, and I do get all users, I should get now all users, where the last one is gonna be Elaine Santos 2. Let's see. Looks like I had a little glitch or something because it inserted the record without the information. So probably in the user information, I got something that is not correct. So let's do this because the video will take me longer to do the debugging. I'm gonna do the insert through the form. Oh yeah, you know what I forgot? I remember now. I'm sorry guys. when I do the post and I have my example person Elaine 2 Santos 2, I forgot to say that the content type was going to be JSON, so it will understand that my request body is going to be JSON. So let me actually copy that from somewhere that I have it. Here it is, content type JSON, so I don't have to type it in and make any mistakes. Now if I do the post again, it should now insert successfully my Elaine Santos 2. Let me go ahead and do a get one more time. Hopefully this time we will get a Elaine Santos 2. There you go, Elaine Santos 2 as the new record. Okay, so all my I'm only missing to test the put and the delete, but again, let me actually do the delete real fast. If I change the verb to delete and I want to delete from the list, I want to delete the one that has the null values, the undefined values, which is going to be ID 38. So I'm going to go delete /38 and I execute that. Now when I do a get, you will see that 38 will be gone because it was a successful execution. So now if I display the users, 36, 39, 38 is gone. No more undefined user in the database. That's as far as the API. So the API is a full functional API for any application. Now, it happens that I'm using that API within my application. So I'm going to now run the application path, which is going to execute the second controller, the application controller. The application controller, of course, has, instead of returning data, it's going to render certain views using the batch view engine with the model data, whatever model data we're using. So let me just show you real quick my views. I got my layout view with the general information about the page, and then I expand into the layout with the different views, partial views for the registration form and for the home page. So let me go ahead and hit those routes real quick. I'm gonna go back, and instead of now going to the API route, I'm just gonna go to the root route. I'm gonna refresh that page, and there you go. You see my website right there. That's my home page. If I click on register, I'm gonna change my route to register route, which is rendering a form within the page. Now I can go ahead and register as, let's say, Luis Perez, and the email is gonna be luis@mycompany.com, password 123, whatever, and I register. I reroute it back to the home page. But if I go back now onto my API users and I get the list, the last one, you will see that it's going to be Luis. So it's a successful registration for the user. So I think for week 1 is as much as I want to implement just the home page, the registration form, the full API functionality. I will continue this application in the next week, in week 3 or so. Thank you very much.